Good evening, everybody. And despite the despite the song, we're going to have a miserable evening together. The misery will be one of our themes for the evening. So before we get into all of that misery and despair, let's begin with just a little bit of joy, actually, because we have a joyous occasion tonight, a little bit of a surprise. Because tonight is Bob Numeroff's 60th birthday, and not only that, but his husband Robert, in honor of Bob's 60th birthday, is sponsoring the next month of our classes. So, happy birthday, Bob! And before I turn it over to Robert to just embarrass Bob a little bit, I'll say that you know, I don't have any favorite students. I love all of you all the same. But I do really love learning with Bob, and someone who comes to my classes regularly, a dear friend of mine, once said, "You love Bob, don't you?" I do. I love Bob because Bob always has a way of kind of sneaking in at the end of the class, very kind of quietly, and just sort of provocatively upending everything we've done. And if it doesn't matter where we are, if we're going in the sort of the traditional, he'll say something radical. If we're going in the radical direction, he'll come in and say something traditional. He'll be provocative either way, and that's just the kind of student that I like, because that's just the kind of student that I am. So happy birthday, Bob. Robert, thank you so much for sponsoring these classes. Do you want to say just a few words? I'm asking you to unmute. There you
go. Hi, everybody. Well, thank you, Rabbi Kasher. Bob has been provocatively upending my world for a long time also. Sadly, I guess I have only known him a little shy of 2/3 of his 60 years. But, you know, there's more to come, I'm sure, I hope. And I thought it was especially appropriate to sponsor these classes because poetry is something dear to both of us. And Rabbi Kasher is also something dear to both of us. And also because Bob has been bringing poetry to my life for a long time. So thank you all for allowing us to commandeer this brief segment of the class with these greetings. It's great to share the occasion with everyone here and with our entire ECAR family.
All right. Happy birthday. Happy birthday, Bob. Thank you, Robert. I love you both. We all love you. Okay, let's get miserable now, shall we? Fire and brimstone. Okay, that we speak sometimes about fire and brimstone preachers. Right? I aspire to be one. Where does that phrase fire and brimstone come from? Anyone know? No? Who's the original fire and brimstone preacher? That would be God, right? Who rained fire and brimstone down on Sodom and Gomorrah, right? But if that's the original source, but if we have a fire and brimstone preacher in Judaism, it would be Sharon Brous. No, it would be Jeremiah. It would be Jeremiah, and in fact, indeed, Jeremiah often references Sodom and Gomorrah in his very nasty prophecies, because those cities were destroyed by the Lord, and Jeremiah's big message is that Jerusalem will be too. Jeremiah is he's such a fire and brimstone preacher that we even have a word in the English language that is based on his name. A Jeremiad is an invective, a screed, a cry of anger, right? Is a Jeremiad. So we're going to look a little bit at Jeremiah tonight, and as always, going to focus on some of his poetry. But let's just, because we're dealing in this series, we looked at Isaiah last week, we're dealing in this series with these, the three, what we call major prophets, and mostly because they just have big, thick books. Because of the major prophets are major, it's important to give a little bit of background So I'll spend the first half of the class kind of teeing us up and giving us a sense of who Jeremiah was and what he was saying, and then we'll do some analysis of the best of his fire and brimstone rhetoric. Jeremiah, in some sense, is like the most successful of the prophets, in the sense that he prophesies something that ends up happening in he's prophesying for decades, and then it happens. He speaks of the conquest of Jerusalem by invaders from the north, and indeed towards the end of Jeremiah's life, the Babylonians conquer Jerusalem. And actually, at that point, the Babylonians free Jeremiah, because the other great fact of Jeremiah's life is that he is, he's constantly speaking about the fall of Jerusalem, and the fall of Jerusalem as a result of the sins of Israel, and nobody liked him for that, right? So he was persecuted constantly, imprisoned and tortured. In fact, the Babylonians released him from prison and were pretty good to him, actually. His best years were at the end. So Jeremiah will take us, let's see, 7th century, 6th century before the Common Era, right up to the Babylonian exile. Now, as for his poetry, I must say, he ain't no Isaiah. Right? Isaiah, if you were with us last week, Isaiah, you saw, is just a master, like a total poetic master. The beauty of Isaiah's language is unparalleled. He is the major of the major prophets. With Jeremiah, it isn't the beauty of the language so much as the rawness of the message. He is, I don't know if it's the most sophisticated poetry that we have in the Hebrew Bible, but it hits hard, right? Last week I compared Isaiah to Yeats, but Jeremiah is more like a Charles Bukowski, right? Just like ripping the world apart. Very soon here in this first source, you're going to see one of the reasons, as we introduce ourselves to Jeremiah, one of the reasons that Jeremiah was in a certain sense unsophisticated will become quite clear. So I'm going to share I'm going to share a source sheet with you, which you can look at. The Hebrew and the English will be out of whack a little bit, so you may or may not prefer to have your own copy there, but I just put it in the chat. But I'll take you through it on my screen. And let's just start, as we always do, just with the opening lines, which will give us a little historical context, but also, as I just said, there's a very obvious reason why Jeremiah's language is not Isaiah language. Let's take a look here. The prophet of doom, right? So it begins, the words of Jeremiah, son of Hilkiah, one of the priests at Anatot in the territory of Benjamin. Okay, he's from a priestly family. The word of the Lord came to him in the days of King Yoshia, son of Ammon of Judah, in the 13th year of his reign. And throughout the days of King Jehoiakim, son of Yoshia of Judah, and until the end of the 11th year of King Tzidkiyahu, son of Yoshiah of Yehuda, when Jerusalem went into exile in the 5th month. Okay, so Jeremiah prophesied through various kings, one after another, various sons of kings, inheritors, and this is how it happened. The word of the Lord, and by the way, I usually translate Adonai as the eternal, but for Jeremiah, it's got to be the Lord, right? It just works. It just works. The Lord, the word of the Lord came to me and said, and here it gets a little poetic. Now, Jeremiah actually has more prose in it than most of the books of prophecy, and that's actually why we know so much about Jeremiah's story. So it's not always easy actually to identify where the poetry is, but the selections I've picked, I have assumed can be written out here in verse form. Before I formed you in the belly, I knew you. Before you came forth from the womb, I consecrated you. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. B'terem etzarcha v'beten yedaticha, u'v'terem tetzei mirechem higdashticha, navi legoyim nataticha. I replied, Ah, Lord God, I don't know how to speak, for I am still a child. V'omar, aha. This is actually, is actually the right translation. Look here in the Hebrew. Lord God, Adonai Elohim, hine lo yadati daber ki nar anochi. And the Eternal said to me, do not say I am still a child, but go wherever I send you and speak whatever I command you. Vayomer Adonai elai, al tamar nar anochi, ki al kol asher eshlachacha telech, vet kol asher atzavcha tedaber. Have no fear of them, for I am with you to deliver you, declares the Lord. Al tirab mipnehem, ki itcha ani lahatzilecha ne'um Adonai. The Lord put out a hand and touched my mouth, and the Lord said to me, behold, I put my words into your mouth. See, I appoint you this day over nations and kingdoms to uproot and to pull down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant. Vishlach Adonai et yado v'yaga al pi v'yomer Adonai elai hine natati devarai b'ficha re'eh hifkadticha hayom hazeh al hagoyim v'al hamamlachot lintosh v'lintots ulahabid v'laharos v'livnot v'limtoa. Okay, so that's the beginning. That's where Jeremiah starts. And what is the reason that Jeremiah is unsophisticated? Well, he's a boy, right? He's a lad. He's a nar is the word in Hebrew. So the first thing that we learn about him is that he got his mission when he was just a very young person, and he didn't want it. He did not want it. Like Moses before him, he rejects the role of prophet, and God forces it upon him. Okay, and what will be his job? What is he to do? To uproot and to pull down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant. Last word there. Okay, so there's a little bit of something, a little note of hope at the end. Pay attention to that language because we're going to see Jeremiah play with it again. Okay, that language of planting. Okay, but for now, let's take a look at some fire and brimstone. Let's see how Jeremiah gets into it when he starts delivering the message that will get him into such trouble. Okay, we're going to now jump to chapter 5 of Jeremiah, and this is some good stuff. This is some classic stuff, and I've tried to select the pieces that are most poetically interesting, but also to tell the story a little bit. But this is the kind of message he delivers. Roam the streets of Jerusalem, search its squares, look about and take note. See if you can find one man. There is none who acts justly, who seeks faith, that I should pardon her. Shotetu b'chutzot Yerushalayim, u'ru'una u'de'u u'vakshu v'rechoteha, im timtzu ish, im yesh oseh mishpat, tivakesh emunah v'eslach la. If they say, as the Lord lives, they are sure to be swearing falsely. V'im chai Adonai yomeru, lechen l'sheker yeshbiehu. O Lord, your eyes look for faith. You struck them, but they sensed no pain. You consumed them, but they would take no discipline. They made their faces harder than stone. They refused to turn back. Adonai, einecha halo le'emunah, hikita otam v'lo chalu, kilitam me'anu kachat musar, chisku fnehem misela, me'anu lashuv. Okay, so that's it. That's Jeremiah. That's the message that we're going to hear for 40 chapters, on and on and on. You're sinners. You're awful. You're worthless. You won't repent, and God will punish you for this. But, and I chose this selection especially for the next line, because there is another voice in Jeremiah, and the next line gives us a little bit of a tip-off to what it will be. But then I thought, They are just poor folk. They act foolishly, for they do not know the way of the Lord, the rules of their God. Vani amarti achtalim hem, noalu, hilo yadu derech Adonai, mishpat Elohehem. Okay, I want actually tonight, our topic will not just be fire and brimstone, because it would be, it's too easy to just do 40 chapters of rage, and we won't leave feeling too good about life or our tradition. What I want to talk about tonight actually is Jeremiah's ambivalence. He doesn't want to do this. He didn't ever want to do this. And all throughout the book, we can see Jeremiah wavering, and Jeremiah not just wavering, but suffering under the weight, under the yoke of his own, of the burden of his own message. Okay, so that's actually the theme that I want to focus on tonight, because I think it's important to remember that Jeremiah was more than just a fire and brimstone preacher. And I think you already have a sense that he was shoved into this job reluctantly. And now we have a hint that he's not even sure about the message he's delivering. Okay, so let's take a look at some of that ambivalence. We're going to now move to chapter 6. I'm giving you just some introductory sections, and soon we'll do some analysis together. But in chapter 6, listen to this language. I think it is so powerful to see him describe his ambivalence, his reluctance, and yet the kind of ineluctability of his mission. To whom shall I speak? Give warning that they may hear. See, their ears are blocked and they cannot listen. See, the word of the Lord has become for them an object of scorn. They will have none of it. Amia dabra va'ida v'yishma'u. Hine arela oznam v'lo yuchlu lakshiv. Hine devar Adonai haya lahem lecherpa lo yachpetzuva. Okay, so it's not like he likes the people. It's not like he doesn't recognize their sin. But listen to this. But I am filled with the wrath of the Lord. I cannot hold it in. Pour it on the kids in the streets and on teenagers in their secret gatherings. Yes, men and women alike shall be captured, elders and those in the fullness of their lives. Vet chamat Adonai mal'eti nil'eti hachil shfoch al olal bachutz. ועל סוד בחורים יחדיו, כי גם איש עם אישה ילכדו, זקן עם מלא ימים. Their houses shall pass to others' fields and wives as well, for I will stretch out my arm against the inhabitants of the country, declares the Eternal. V'nasabu vatehem lacherim, sadot v'nashim yachdav, ki ated yadi, va'al yoshvei haaretz ne'um Adonai. From the smallest to the greatest, they are all greedy for gain. Priest and prophet alike, they all act falsely. Ki miktanam va'ad gdolam, kulo botzei abatza, uminavi va'ad kohen, kulo oseh shaker. They offer healing so easily for the wounds of my people, saying all is well, when nothing is well. Vayrapu et shever ami al nakala, lemor shalom, shalom, ve'en shalom. They have acted shamefully. They have done abhorrent things, yet they do not feel shame, and they cannot be made to blush. Assuredly, they shall fall among the fallen. When I come to take account of them, they will fail, said the Eternal. Oh, I translate. I was the Lord, said the Lord. Let's keep it as the Lord. Hovishu ki toeva asu, ki bosh lo yevoshu, gam hachlim lo yada'u, lachen yiplu benoflim, ba'et pekadim, yikashlu, amar Adonai. Okay, so, all right, so we're looking now a little bit at that ambivalence, that he doesn't want to do this. And look at the language here, right? He is filled with the wrath of the Lord. He cannot hold it in. It is like this force. What is prophecy? I mean, we don't really know, but it seems to, it's something he cannot control. It comes out of him, right? But on the other hand, he's delivering the message. So let's start by talking about a little bit about what that message is. I mean, what is the problem? What is he identify? What's the problem with the people? Let's start there. What's wrong? Well, let's diagnose. Yeah, Miriam.
They're simple people and they don't even know that they're doing wrong.
Right. Okay. So that's part of it. They're doing these terrible things, but a lot of them don't know it. I mean, that is to their credit, to their defense. They're ignorant.
They're ignorant.
But Jeremiah is not, in the end, just talking about the ignorant people, right? Who is guilty here? And this is important because it also, I think, speaks to the ambivalence. Who's guilty in this land? Anne.
They have no shame.
That's right. That is part of the problem as well. They're doing it and they're doing these terrible things and they don't care. They don't care. They have no sense of self-awareness, right? Good. Who's to blame here? Who is he blaming?
Everyone.
Okay, that's the right answer. Everyone. That's it, from big to small, and women and men, and everyone is to blame. But I want us to pay attention to something a little subversive in Jeremiah's message. Everyone is to blame, but look at how he focuses on
the
priests and prophet alike. Priests and prophet alike. What is Jeremiah? A priest and a prophet alike, right? So he's really, in some ways, he's willing to attack everyone. He's willing to attack his own. But part of what he's saying is don't trust leaders. Don't trust my group. Don't trust the prophets even, right? Maybe me and no one else, like that. I guess that's the obvious way to read it. But there is something in his message that's like, there's no one that can be trusted, no message that can be trusted. It's all a total mess, okay? All right. Any other kind of responses so far before we head into the next couple of chapters? We're going to analyze more thoroughly. Yeah, Elle.
What's jumping out at me is that the people have absolutely no connection or faith in God. If they did, then they would be on a different path. When he says they don't know God's ways, I don't think he means they're not aware of them. I think he means they're lo yodim otam. They haven't internalized them. They're not embracing them. Yeah.
You're bringing us right to very important language, Al, because I think it's actually it's a little ambiguous. It's not clear when he talks about these people who do not know or do not like. Sometimes it's obvious that they don't care or they're doing it recklessly, but sometimes it seems like they're just ignorant. And where is the line between their ignorance, which could be more forgivable, and their kind of recklessness, their deliberate ignorance of God and God's law? Yeah, Michal.
But I wonder if there's something to look at in that list of going through the ages. You have it as kids, teenagers, adults, and old people.
Yeah.
And to say like ignorance only takes you so far. At a certain point, you are responsible for knowing.
Right.
And so you can't claim ignorance in certain things at a certain point.
Yeah, that's very well said. Right. There's a reason that he's parsing out all the different groups, and like the wrath is gonna. First of all, when we say pour out wrath on the kids, the children in the streets. It feels like that's not, and yeah, teenagers is probably a modern translation, bachurim, right? Young men, but like not adults. But
well, maybe adults, maybe young adults.
Okay, but Michal's point is well taken. There are more and less culpable groups here, and I want to just track that analysis with the earlier point that like priests and prophets, they should know better. right? So yeah, we're damning everybody, but if we're damning everybody, we're really damning those who ought to know better. And that includes adults and old people, and it includes his own class. Sally?
I wanted to say that you can't act falsely if you don't know better, right? So they're talking about acting falsely. People who know better can act falsely, and that is the priest and prophet, that they know better and act sort of in violation of their knowledge. And they spread it around. They don't just act falsely in their own world. They go and heal people, saying, Hakol beseder, it'll be okay. It'll be okay.
Yeah, thanks for pointing us back to that line, because I think that's the best one in here. They offer healing so easily. Like, they offer healing, that's nice, but so easy. V'yirapu et shever ami al nakala, just as if it was nothing. Lemor shalom, shalom, ve'ein shalom. They say, oh, shalom, peace, all is well, but nothing is well. It's worse. That they're pretending like they're solving the problem, and they're not solving the problem. They're pretending like nothing is wrong and something is deeply, deeply wrong, right? As Jeremiah is here to say. Okay. I just saw that chat, Emil Stern, and that's, yeah, Jeremiah starts a long tradition of grumpy Jewish men. Okay, now I want to bring us to a really critical chapter, and I mean that in both ways, right? It's vital, and it's also, there's something sort of surprising here. There's a critique emerging from Jeremiah, and I've been trying to build this, right? There's a certain kind of ambivalence, certain kind of uncertainty in Jeremiah's message, but actually in chapter 12, he says it mifurash, explicitly, okay? So we're gonna take a look in greater depth at chapter 12. So let's take a look here. This to me was just moving through the book again, this to me was a surprise. You will win, O Lord, if I make a claim against you. Yet I shall present charges against you. Why does the way of the wicked prosper? Why are the workers of treachery at ease? Sadiq ata Adonai ki ariv elecha, ach mishpatim adaber otach. Madua derech hashayim tzalecha, shalu kol bogdei vaged. You have planted them, and they have taken root. There's that language of planting again. You have planted them, and they have taken root. They spread, they even bear fruit. You are present in their mouths, but far from their inner thoughts. Natatam gam shorashu, yilchu gam asu feri, karovata bafihem verachok mikil yosehem. Yet you, O Lord, have known and observed me. You have tested my heart and found it with you. Drive them out like sheep to the slaughter. Prepare them for the day of killing. Va'ata Adonai yadatani tir'eni, uvachanta libi itach. Hatikem katzon letivcha, hakdishem liyom harega. How long must the land languish and the grass of all the countryside dry up? Must beasts and bird perish because of the evil of its inhabitants, who say, God will not look upon our ways? Ad matai te'aval ha'aretz, ve'esev kol hasadeh yiv'ash, mirat yoshveva softa vehemot va'of, ki amru lo yireh et achritenu. Okay, so Jeremiah has a claim. Jeremiah is pressing charges. So what is Jeremiah's claim against God? What case is Jeremiah bringing to God? Because after all, Jeremiah is admitting that everybody is wicked. And not only that, Jeremiah is saying, kill them all, right? So, but let's just start with, what is his claim against God? What is he saying that God has done, that God has, and I know you, God, you're gonna end up in the right, because you always do, but nevertheless, I'm gonna press charges against you. So what is Jeremiah's claim? How would you keep making it for him?
Why did you create evil?
Great. the very capacity for human beings to do wrong. Didn't you put that in us? Didn't you plant that in us? Right? Anyone else? Anne?
I mean, the wicked are prospering. I mean, he's saying,
Good.
why are
good,
they
good.
prospering? I mean, they speak of you, but they're wielding the name of God, but they have no conscience, and they go and prosper. They're running the place.
Good. So Stephen's point, you are the one that made them evil, and Anne's point, and you seem to be rewarding them. This is all your fault. I mean, you could set the whole game up differently. Did I see Roseanne had a hand up? Roseanne Cannon? No? No? Okay. Okay. All right, that's
He has chutzpah to say things bad to God. I mean, to criticize God like that. I'm like, oh my God, how did you do this, God? You're the one who created all this. Why are you blaming them?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Like
Chutzpah.
yeah, chutzpah of God, you're saying.
No, chutzpah of Jeremiah for saying these things to God.
Yeah, that's what I thought you meant. This is actually quite shocking that in the middle of, and we know that Jeremiah didn't want the job, Moses didn't want the job, but to turn around and say, how dare you? How dare you? And it actually works both ways, right? It's a chutzpah, God. It's a chutzpah for you to create human beings like this and then to reward them for their evil acts and then to punish them for that? What kind of world, what's the system here? Okay, what's the system? Emil?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's actually the opposite of what I expected, because like you think of prophet as being channeling from God to the people. And this is just fascinating to me that it's like he's pushing back like very strongly.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Jeremiah's coming across a lot more likable than I thought he would be, because he's kind of an advocate for the people in this, which I just didn't expect at all. But I also wanted to ask about the land, about like the beasts and the birds and the land suffering. Like, what's that about? Is that because the wicked people are neglecting the land, or is it just because like...
Okay, yeah, okay. I want to move to that in just a second. Let me turn first to Roseanne, who did have a hand up. Just unmute yourself, or I can ask you to unmute.
Okay, I was very much struck by the images and the language, that things aren't growing, the planting and the growing. It reminded me, I think of it was Moshe's words when he, at the end of the book, he's not going to go into the promised land. I think it's he who says, if you follow everything that God has taught you, the crops will grow and the seasons will come as they're supposed to, and everything will bloom. I can't remember the phraseology exactly, but it just was very reminiscent of that.
Okay, good. So more, Roseanne?
No, just if you don't follow the commandments, and even if not commandments, if you're not godly, things will be out of whack. The universe, including nature, won't be right.
Good. Okay. So in a way, you're Roseanne is answering the query that Emil brought up just beforehand, which is what's the deal with all the beasts and the birds? He's worried about the beasts and birds and the land. And Roseanne is giving us some logic to that, which is, look, God is now destroying, remember fire and brimstone. God's going to just rain hellfire on the earth. But do the trees deserve that? Do the animals deserve that? There's a kind of a cycle that Roseanne reminds us of, that's set up in the Torah. If you behave well, I'll give you good rain in its time, and if you don't, then I won't. But Jeremiah is thinking, wait a minute, but there are other living creatures. I'm reading this novel right now, this sci-fi novel from China called The Three-Body Problem, which I recommend. And the crux of the story is that the human beings cannot be trusted anymore to do good to the earth, and so like aliens have to be summoned, right, to help us, because we're not, right? And it's environmental activists who are doing this. Like, you can't let the human beings run it anymore. They're ruining everything, right? Okay, all right, so that's good. Yes, Michal?
I'm really, unless I'm misunderstanding this, which is entirely possible, he starts by saying you created this system and then immediately pivots to, so just kill them, which doesn't seem like he's advocating for them at all. And I'm quite confused.
Good, that's my next question. Jeremiah is, on the one hand, bringing this claim against God. It's not just. And yet his solution is, come on, let's just kill them. What is in that? That's too much. Let the day of killing come. What is he saying there? Okay, I'm gonna turn to the hands that are up. Florine?
I'm not sure it's poetry as much as it's a kind of inner dialogue. I've never heard a person who's being channeled dispute within himself the channeling.
Yeah, right.
So it's like a back and forth dialogue. And I think he wants him to be killed so he doesn't have to be the channel anymore.
Well, that's a great answer, Florine. First of all, you're exactly right about what we've seen just in this short section, but also it's true for the whole book of Jeremiah. The book is a mess. It's like back and forth, and it's like poetry and prose, and if there's ambivalence in Jeremiah's heart, you feel it in the book. It's like you can't always tell who's talking. Right? Jeremiah will often say, Ne'um Adonai, Amar Adonai, God said this. Right? Because there's a way in which it's all quoting God, and then Jeremiah enters in and is in dialogue with God, and then God talks back to Jeremiah, and then Jeremiah talks to the people. Like, it's very, right? So you hear the Jeremiah sort of, the message almost being torn apart as it is given, right? Like, what is it, as you put it, so what is it for someone to channel God, and then in the midst, challenge the channeling in the midst of the channeling, right? So I think that's right. And your answer to Michal's question is, like Jeremiah is saying, look, if there's this is a very good answer. If there's a problem, deal with it. Just, if you're going to punish people, kill them already. Don't make me do it. Don't make me suffer for decades trying to just yelling at people, just condemning people. Why are you dragging this out? You're going to do it? Do it. Right? So that's not a inspiring message, but at least has some, Florine has given us some logic to it. Okay, all right, Alexandra.
I have, that might be a sort of a different point of view from Florine's, in that, well, I think it's cool that he's like arguing with God in this moment, in that he said at first, hey, God, I'm a boy, like I'm not up to the task. And I think that God is intentionally wanting him to argue because he needs to grow up and to gain this strength. And he, for his task, needs to become someone of strength and valor and all these things that you learn when you grow up, and who better to learn it from than a God who pushes all your buttons as God only knows them to be. And I also just wanted to highlight, someone had said that the people have no shame. And I really wanted to highlight that there's no reasoning with someone who can feel no negative emotion for what they've done. There's no sort of way to train that person, as far as I know, to do well. It's sort of a hopeless case at that point.
Yeah, I appreciate Alexandra's comment, because it is important to consider, if it's ambivalence, he's on both sides, right? And there is this way in which Jeremiah must be, I mean, he's not just giving the message and hating it the whole time, or maybe he's hating it, but he's not giving it and without conviction. I mean, there's real conviction in this, and there is this way in which you can hear Jeremiah at certain points siding with God, or trying to understand where God is coming, or maybe fully understanding where God is coming from. If you ask Jeremiah, are the people wicked? I think he would say yes. Do they deserve this? I don't know, but that's at least a voice in his head, right? He is at least, and maybe as Alexander suggests, maybe he's striving to be the prophet that he is at this point feels too undeveloped to be. Okay, Sally. Or is this that hand from before? No.
No, I'm good. This was interesting because I feel like this is the argument that everybody makes about God. Like it's one of the first things you hear. If God exists, why the Holocaust? Why do horrible things happen? Why do bad people succeed? Why does lying work? Da, 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 da. And I think he comes from the perspective of, look, you want me to be a prophet. You want me to carry your word to convince people that following the path of God is the right thing to do. Well, help me out a bit. If you're going, you have to benefit people who are doing it. And if you're not going, if all these people are so bad, just kill them all so that I can then say, look, you have to follow the word of God. It struck me as sort of this really essential argument that he's having with people.
Yeah, right. And remember, we saw before, he said, you're not, like, you're rewarding the wicked. Like, if they prosper, that's because of you. So give people what they deserve. I don't know if Jeremiah believes that everybody deserves to die, but if the way Sally puts it, if it's true, fine, do it. But you're not, we already see that you're not doing that, right? Like we already see that people aren't getting what they deserve. So, like, why is it on me? Let's look at your system first, right? Right? It's a very fundamental claim, right? At the heart of this all, you could believe that people are terribly wicked, and yet that in itself is a kind of a proof that there's no God in the world, because they get away with it, right? So at the very giving of the message, right? This in some ways answers Florine's puzzlement, right? In the very giving of the message of damnation, there's a kind of condemnation of God as well. Okay, all right. Now, this is poetry, so I think, we have a sense of Jeremiah's back and forth, and I've chosen to focus on that in part to redeem Jeremiah, as Emil said, like, hey, I didn't know Jeremiah actually defended the people, but also because I wanted to build us towards what I think is really poetically the most beautiful chapter in Jeremiah, and that is chapter 20. I think this is, just as poetry goes, the best chapter in the book, but as content goes, it is not the most damning of the people, but the most painful, right? And I want us to remember, as we consider Jeremiah's message, I want to remember again and again that this was a man who suffered. I think most scholars believe that there was a Jeremiah, and that, like, the story is that he was imprisoned, persecuted, starved. I mean, this is a man who was, well, let's listen to it in his own words. Okay, this is chapter 20 of the book. Okay, this is great stuff. Language-wise, this is great stuff. It's not so good otherwise. Okay, you enticed me, O Lord, and I was enticed. You overpowered me, and you prevailed. I have become a laughingstock all day long. Everyone jeers at me. Pitatani Adonai va'epat. Chazaktani v'tuchal. Ha'iti lischok kol hayom. Kulo loegli. For every time I speak, I must cry out, must shout violence and theft. For the word of the Lord causes me disgrace and contempt all day long. Ki midei adaber ezak chamas v'shod ekra. Ki haya devar Adonai li lecherpa ulekelis kol hayom. I thought, I will not mention God. No more will I speak in God's name. But it was like a fire raging in my heart, shut up in my bones. I could not hold it in. I was helpless. V'amarti, lo eskerenu, v'lo adaber od bishmo, v'aya v'libi ka'esh bo'eret, atzur ba'atzmotai, v'nil'eti kalchel v'lo uchal. I heard the whispers of the crowd, terror all around. Inform, let us inform against him. All my friends are waiting for me to stumble. Perhaps he can be entrapped, and we can prevail against him and take our vengeance on him. Ki shamati dibat rabim, magur misaviv, hagidu v'nagidenu kol enosh lomi shomre tzal'i, ulai yifuteh v'nuchlalo v'nikcha v'nikmatenu mimenu. But the Lord is upon me like a warrior. Therefore my persecutors shall stumble. They shall not prevail and shall not succeed. They shall be utterly shamed with an eternal humiliation which shall not be forgotten. Vadonai oti kagibor, aritz al ken rodfai, yikashlu velo yuchalu, boshu ma'od ki lo hiskilu, klimat olam lo tishchacheach. O Lord of hosts, who tests the righteous, who examines the heart and mind, let me see your retribution upon them, for I lay my case before you. Adonai tzvaot, bochen tzadik, roeh chlayot v'lev, ere nikmatcha mehem, ki elecha giliti et rivi. That's a complicated sentence. And then something very strange happens. And you can see it actually in the way that this little samech here means that there's a little break in the text. And there's one line, right? So that's the bulk of the chapter. And then there's one line all of a sudden, Shir l'Adonai, hallelujah Adonai, ki hitzil et nefesh evyon miyad mereim. Sing unto the Lord, praise the Lord, for God has rescued the needy from the hands of evildoers. This is like weird. And not only is it weird, but there's another break, another samech. So there's this line just sort of like plunged in there, right? We read all this, right? All of this suffering, all the bones are burning with fire, and then all of a sudden, sing unto the Lord, praise the Lord, God rescue, and then all of a sudden break again, and now the worst of it. As if well, I'll ask you to make sense of this. I don't know how to make sense of it. And now the worst of it. This is how he ends the chapter. Arur hayom asher yuladti bo, yom asher yeladatni imi, al yehi baruch. Cursed be the day I was born, the day my mother bore me, let it not be blessed. Cursed be the man who brought my father the news and said, a boy is born to you, and gave him such joy. Arur ha'ish asher bisaret avi lemor, yulad lecha ben zachar, sameach simachau. Let that man become like the cities which the Lord overthrew without relenting. Let him hear shrieks in the morning and at the sound of the alarm and the sound of the alarm at noon. V'haya ha'ishahu ke'arim asher hafach Adonai v'lo nicham. V'shama za'aka b'boker u'tru'a ba'etz tzorayim. Because he did not kill me before my birth, so that my mother might be my grave, her womb pregnant for all time. Asher lo matatani merachem. Vatihili imi kivri, v'rachma harat olam. Okay, wow. Okay, so first of all, who did? If you've been learning with us all along here, that last piece, "Cursed be the day I was born," who does that remind you of? Some of you probably know. Okay. I heard it. I just heard it.
Job.
Job. That's right. That's right, Job. That's Job language right there, right? Job, Jeremiah, God's prophet, suffered as only Job did. But you know, the difference between them is that Job didn't know what was going on. Jeremiah did. And frankly, I don't know which one is worse, right? So what do you, I see some hands flying up here. Why is Jeremiah saying this to God all of a sudden? right? There are 20 more chapters in the book. So like, what's happening here? What all of a sudden is Jeremiah just sort of laying his bloody heart on the table, right? Yonatan.
I do want to inject into this conversation that with the exception of the Torah, the rest of the Bible was not written. I mean, we have, the Bible that we can go and buy, but that's not the way it was written, right? That there was whatever prophecy and whatever revelation that was revealed in whatever format, for all we know, may have been oral, may not have been written at all at the time, and was later put down, compiled, edited, right? So, and most of, the overwhelming majority of prophecy was not preserved. And we know this. And you and I have had this conversation that I believe prophecy is an ongoing thing. I don't think it ever stopped. I don't know why that line that you said, like, oh, praise God, was stuck in there. But I think a lot of what we're looking at is not just Jeremiah speaking. It's the question of what kind of biases led to the preservation of this piece of Jeremiah's work out of all of his life's work. Why is this what gets curated to us to read?
Yeah, that's all of that is very well said. And I'll offer just another spin on the sort of the same axis, which is that this is at the very least, and it's explicitly a collection of prophecies that happened over decades, right? Like it says so at the beginning, he prophesied throughout all these. So this is like various moments that Jeremiah had. So even in the most holistic look at the book, we're seeing a kind of a development of Jeremiah. Now, Yonatan rightly wonders, well, how was it all put together? There's a tradition that he had a scribe, Baruch ben Neriah, that put it together. But we can also wonder with any section that we're reading, well, was this just a bad day for Jeremiah? Was this a good day? Was this an angry day? Like there's an evolution here at the very least from start to finish, if not more scattered than that. So well put. Kathy.
So I have it's a comment, but it's really a question. I'm just really struck that from the very beginning, it's like Jeremiah's in the womb. I mean, not just a young lad, whatever, but actually in the womb at the beginning. And it's sort of like, I knew you before I formed you in the belly, I knew you. That's what God says at the beginning. And so, I just find that sort of theme. And there's more about, I guess, in the middle part about Jeremiah just being born, or even before being born, and then this part at the end. But what my question is, I don't understand what this says about, evil and responsibility and the accountability of the people and that sort of thing, because it seems like it's sort of like for Jeremiah, he is who he is from before he's born. And that just in being born, like, if, it's like he himself doesn't seem to be responsible for his actions or accountable or anything like that. It's just, he is who he is, but everybody else is, you judge them as if they were making decisions about their lives. I just don't understand, but it seems significant. I don't know what.
Yeah, brilliant, Kathy, really brilliant. I mean, that's exactly what's going on in this chapter, right? The book started with like, before I knew you, I formed you in the womb. I appointed you as a prophet from the belly. That's the first thing that Jeremiah ever hears from God. So when Jeremiah says, I wish that they had killed me before I exited that womb, Jeremiah is saying to God, I didn't ever want this, and I now would have preferred that I never existed. Right? All of that talk of, you tapped me for this? Well, thanks a lot. Tap someone else. Right? And as Kathy puts it, part of what he's doing here, and we've seen him do it throughout, and we've seen these lines, the most powerful lines to me are the ones where he says, I want to stop myself, but I can't, like it flows out. And there is this, you know, as I said, we don't know exactly what prophecy is, but Jeremiah gives us one account of the phenomenology of it, which is just, there's something just unstoppable. He has become a kind of a vessel who has no control over his own words, his own destiny, right? And he just in that, he didn't want that life, right? He just didn't want that life.
But then
Right.
how can he assume that everybody else is accountable for their actions and is making choices about who they are and what they do? How can
Right. Yeah, I mean, that is a good question, and I will leave it lingering, but there seems to be a kind of, Jeremiah is different than everybody else, right? Jeremiah is the tool of God. Like, these people are actually living, making choices, you know, like maybe they should be punished, maybe they shouldn't, maybe they can be of value, but Jeremiah is just a vessel, right? And so there is a way in which, like, he's not even allowed to live, but you're right, there's something about it that sort of belies the message, which is that people should choose differently. And maybe Jeremiah is trying to choose differently. Maybe Jeremiah, in the midst of, right, as Florine said, right, he's seized by the prophecy, but he's like trying to get out of it. He's trying to break free and say his own thing. But once again, Adonai, God comes back and starts talking through him. Imagine if you couldn't control the voice of prophecy that was coming out of your mouth. Okay, we're almost out of time, but I want to give the last comment to Jen.
My feeling about this part is always going to be colored by the fact that one line about God knowing you in your womb is what my wife used to come out. That's what got her to come out. So this is what it feels like to be visibly queer. This is what it feels like to be visibly marginalized on a lot of levels, that you are someone who's constantly pointing out the iniquities of the world around you, whether you want to or not. And there are those moments of, why did you have to make me different? Why did you have to make me somebody who's out there challenging what it means to love, or challenging what it means to have a partnership? Or like, why did you have to make me visibly disabled? Or why did you, like, all of those things? Like, I love that we're actually getting all of those emotional bits and pieces of what it's like to live a life prophetically. And I just relate so deeply to it. So it's not poetic, it's personal, but I just see that as being such a great template for what it's like for you to be prophetic without wanting to be, which is a position many of us are put into.
Wow. So profound. I mean, thank you so much for that comment. That's such a profound insight into that thing that Jeremiah represents, which is someone who's just born that way. What are you gonna? And how many of our heroes, how many of the sort of people who we admire, who have like brought some kind of truth to the world, how many of them have suffered their whole, and wouldn't have chosen that path at all, right? So beautifully put. Before we close, there are notes of hope in Jeremiah, right? So we get some of our famous liturgy, right, from Jeremiah, right? Like at weddings we sing Kol Sason V'Kol Simcha, right? That comes from Jeremiah, the voice of gladness and joy. Now, it's not actually in the poetic sections, but I wanted to end with it, not just to end on a note of hope, but because it's also an interesting moment, this sort of brief moment of joy in Jeremiah. Take a look at where that appears. Here's the famous line. Thus said the Lord, this chapter 33 now, we're getting close to the end. Thus said the Lord, again there shall be heard in this place which you say is ruined, without man or beast, in the towns of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem that are desolate, without man, without inhabitants, without beast, the sound of joy and gladness, the sound of groom and bride, the voice of those who cry, give thanks to the Lord of hosts, for the Lord is good, God's kindness is everlasting, as they bring thanksgiving offerings to the house of the Lord. For I will restore the fortunes of the land as of old, said the Lord. Okay, so there is this note of hope at the end, but it's God talking, right? It's not Jeremiah talking. And God hasn't said anything like this before. And listen to this language. There shall be heard in this place, which you say is ruined, you all. You say that the towns of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem, right? This is language that Jeremiah used before. So it is as if God is kind of responding to Jeremiah. And it's almost as if Jeremiah has kind of dared God into it, right? Like, is there no hope at all, God? Are you really this full of venom and rage? Right? And God, in some sense, has to respond. Whoa! There will be a redemption, and in that sense, maybe Jeremiah was a great prophet in two senses, right? Both in the sense that he predicted the destruction, but maybe also in some way that he forced the redemption, forced God into it. So that's a good note to end on. Thank you all for your wisdom this evening. Join us next week for Ezekiel, the weirdest of the major prophets. Happy birthday again to Bob, and thanks again to Robert, and good night to you all.